Welcome to the Forbidden History Podcast. We're an independent podcast, and advertisements help keep us going. Ads are automatically placed and not specifically chosen or endorsed by us unless read by me, the host. Thanks for supporting the show. One of the most spectacular railway lines ever built, with an extraordinary shrouded history.
If you want to smuggle people, you can go through Canfranc. If you want to do anything illegal at all, Canfranc is your place.
Secret documents revealing smuggled World War II Nazi treasure.
86.5 tons of gold have been shipped through Canfranc from occupied France.
On one level, literally, you have Nazis holding parties. And yet on the level above them, you've got railway workers who are gathering information and selling it on.
And an engineering project that became a victim of its own ambition.
A massive success in terms of scale, trying to conquer the mountains. But in human terms, what was it all about?
This is the Trans-Pyrenees railway line, and here is its hidden story. At the heart of the Trans-Pyrenees line is a deserted building of epic proportion.
Canfranc is in the middle of nowhere. It's set in this niche valley high up in the Pyrenean mountains. It's a super eerie place. When it was built, it was one of the largest stations in Europe.
It's not for nothing that it was nicknamed the Titanic of the mountains.
You've got to get a sense of the scale of Canfranc. It's absolutely massive. It's 240 meters long, that's nearly 800 feet. And it's got as many windows as there are days of the year, and there are over 150 doors. It's sometimes called the Versailles of the Pyrenees, and for good reason.
Some have even dubbed it Europe's unluckiest train station.
In the big cities of the world, in New York, Paris and London, you get these massive stations that are statements of confidence and reliability about the railways. But this isn't in a capital city. This is in the middle of nowhere. But it's a border, and it's an important political statement from one country to another.
These two countries are France and Spain, divided by a mighty mountain range that stretches over 250 miles from coast to coast between the Atlantic Ocean and the Mediterranean Sea. Those mountains have been crossed by the bravest adventurers for centuries, for trade, pilgrimage, and even war.
The Pyrenees is the natural border, but it's also a very tough border to get across.
The Trans-Pyrenean route took a long time to build. It was fraught with danger and difficult obstacles.
Crossing the Pyrenees is a landmark in engineering history, an incredible achievement. But it turned out not to be an amazing success.
Two lines were built at the turn of the 20th century, one from Spain and the other from France, and they crossed right through the Pyrenees and met in Canfranc. Today, the abandoned station is a testament to its former glory and remains the guardian of many secrets. Jonathan Diaz is a French retired bus driver who used to travel to Canfranc daily.
It's so weird, it feels like the place is cursed.
In the winter of 2000, he made a remarkable discovery that shocked the world.
I had gone for a walk after a 2-hour drive, and I came across some old papers just thrown on the ground.
What he found was a clue to one of the most important questions of the Second World War.
I took a handful of papers, and luckily enough, one of them said, "Lingotes de oro, gold bar." It's thanks to these two words that I thought, it can't be. There were papers all over the ground.
They were copies of orders that indicated precisely that nearly 86.5 tons of gold had been shipped through Canfranc from occupied France.
Unbelievably, what Jonathan had found was official documentation that proved the passage of Nazi gold through the station during World War II.
Over 80 tons of gold went through here at Canfranc. None of the historians I talked to knew about it, and no one had mentioned it in their history books.
When you look at 86 tons of gold, you look at hundreds of millions of dollars. This is a lot of wealth going into Spain.
The Nazis were always interested in gold. They had plundered gold from the central banks of various countries they occupied. Also, notoriously, Jews who died in the concentration camp had gold fillings extracted from their teeth. And they plundered private gold, rings, jewelry, earrings, that sort of thing, from the people who they persecuted and killed. The mystery has been whatever happened to that gold.
This discovery was like a bombshell in the history of Canfranc. But how was so much freight activity possible in the first place? And how was this railway line carved through the mountains? Rewind to the mid-19th century, when the railway was only a pipe dream.
There were already lines going either side of the Pyrenees, getting to France, to Spain. But they needed a faster route to get between Paris and Madrid. And this, they decided, was the way of doing it. Right across the top, going through these mountains, going up to the valleys. Build it they must, they thought, and build it they did.
Nowadays, the modern road follows the train tracks and the rail buildings that remain. Local historian Regine Payot-Gerbet knows them well.
In French, the word for all these tunnel bridges is ouvrage d'art, artworks. When you think that it was all done by hand, the name makes complete sense.
But these works had a price.
The railway construction was hugely costly, not in terms of money, but also in terms of lives. It was a really treacherous route to build through those mountains and those tunnels and those bridges. They required huge amounts of explosives that, of course, were being detonated, at frequent intervals. It's a dangerous place to work.
The problem was that the French side of the Pyrenees was particularly steep. So how did the 20th century engineers cope with the mountain's seemingly impossible gradient?
The obvious answer was hydroelectric. Use the power of the mountain to generate electricity, to drive those trains. What a simple solution.
The electric trains were better on slopes than steam-powered ones. Without this solution, a train through the Pyrenees would not have been viable. But even electric trains have their limits. So other feats of engineering were desperately needed.
There are lots of different ways to get an engine up a mountain, to conquer the gradient. But the loveliest solution, and this railway has got a perfect example, is to build a spiral. So the entrance point is almost in the same place as the exit point, with a big circle in between, but 60 metres apart. That's 190 feet. Very, very elegant and totally hidden within the mountain.
It's confusing because the train go in and start by going in the opposite direction to the place you actually mean to go.
The spiral tunnel was ingenious, but labor-intensive. To go up 190 feet, workers had to dig a mile-long tunnel. But the crown jewel of the Trans-Pyrenees construction was the majestic Canfranc station itself. However, there was a problem from the beginning. The tracks didn't match in size.
The French on their standard gauge and the Spanish on a slightly broader gauge meant that trains couldn't pass straight through.
Everything stopped. This was basically a great big border. Yeah, it was a Trans-Pyrenean railway, but really actually it was two railways which stopped in the middle.
Despite knowledge of the French gauge, the Spanish had built their railway system with a different one, a sign that they didn't necessarily trust their neighbors to the north.
In peacetime, railways are mainly used for leisure, business and freight. But in wartime, they become a vulnerability, allowing the enemy to penetrate deep into foreign territories.
In fact, the truth is that the Spanish started building their railway system in 1848, 80 years before the Trans-Pyrenees line was opened. When the Canfranc station was being built, the Spanish actually wanted to encourage a good relationship between the two countries. But they already had their train tracks in place, which were of different gauge to the French.
Canfranc is not just a break of gauge point, it's also a border town. So when the passengers have to change trains between the wide gauge and the narrow gauge, or vice versa, they also have to have their passports checked as well. It's a massive, massive operation. Your luggage, stuff moved across. It's a massive break of journey at that station.
The wait could be very long, and Canfranc was there to accommodate everyone's needs. A luxury hotel, a vast luggage run, a bureau de change, and a post office for each country.
I mean, even the French side had to accommodate the French embassy, for example, and all the staff working in this mountain resort, effectively, in the middle of nowhere.
It is the size of about 20 hotels on the Riviera, just built in a row and all cobbled together. It is the most extraordinary place.
The thing that stands out in the holiday photographs is Canfranc Station, the Titanic of the mountains. But actually, the real engineering is behind that.
The station, for all its grandeur, was in great danger. To protect it, the engineers would have to play God and harness the unpredictable forces of nature. Rocío Hurtado is a Spanish mountain engineer who's passionate about her predecessor's work and understands the inhospitable landscape well.
When people come to Canfranc, they come to see the station, but they don't look around and see this big forest.
It's hard to believe, but every single tree in the mountains surrounding Canfranc has a purpose.
When they started building, they realized that it was the worst place for building a station because there were avalanches and rocks falling from everywhere.
In winter, a huge amount of snow can build up in the mountains above Canfranc, threatening to destroy everything in its path. The engineers were forced to throw money at the problem, and 40% of their entire budget was spent purely on its protection alone. 3 times the usual amount for a project of this kind.
Millions of trees were planted up to the tree line around the mountains just to protect it and try to slow some of that snow down before it hit the station.
One by one, 7 million trees were planted. But trees alone would not stop the power of the snow.
These big structures were also constructed to protect both the station and the forest.
The defenses didn't stop there. Once the snow melted, fast-flowing water became the next threat.
The river that ran through this, the River Aragon, was diverted away from the station with these extra steps put in it as well, just to try and make sure this treacherous river didn't knock down the railway. I mean, the entire landscape is a massive feat of engineering.
But giant snowslides, falling rocks, and bursting rivers weren't the Spanish engineers' only problems. Crossing the mountain's gaping valleys also needed practical solutions.
You don't have to be an expert to see the Tanabe Viaduct as a thing of beauty. 28 arches in a sort of S shape that the locals refer to as a snail, marching across the valley. This elegant, man-made simplicity against the chaotic nature of the wild environment. It's a beautiful contrast.
The final piece of the puzzle to link France with Spain was the Somport Tunnel that was dug in 1912.
The Pyrenees are no more, they shouted across the valley, because finally they've managed to cross this great divide, the Pyrenean mountain.
The building works carried on through the First World War, and in 1928, the mighty Trans-Pyrenean Railway was finally operational. The festivities for its opening were on a grand scale.
You had the President of France came down, by train, of course, and you had the King of Spain who came up. And the local Spanish MP then drove the opening train into Canfranc station. This was a massive, massive thing, particularly for Spain, because it was quite an isolated country, commerce-wise. Suddenly, with the creation of this tunnel and the Trans-Pyrenean route, they had, in theory, this new direct route to the rest of the world, leading to, a different future for the country.
A fancy meal was thrown for the dignitaries. Champagne flowed in the station, and they dined on truffles and sirloin with buttered peas.
And then they actually went on up into France for a second great lunch, so big with these celebrations and their pride in the opening of this railway.
But trouble was brewing. Who knew the future of the line that seemed so bright during the opening celebrations would so quickly fall under an ominous cloud?
The railway took over 40 years to finish, which actually is longer than it saw effective use. And you have to wonder whether it really was a success.
As if to announce the problems to come, the station suffered a fire within 3 years of its opening. And in 1936, Spain found itself in the throes of a civil war between fascists and anti-fascists. After 3 years of ferocious conflict, General Franco's fascist party ceased power. In these troubled times, it forced the Trans-Pyrenean line into an actual secret front line.
Because Canfranc is in the middle of nowhere, it makes it the absolutely perfect place for anything clandestine to go on. If you want to smuggle people, you can go through Canfranc. If you want to smuggle gold, you can go through Canfranc. If you want to do anything illegal at all, Canfranc is your place.
Franco knew this, and it sealed the Somport Tunnel during the Civil War. He could use it like a valve, opening and closing it at will. But when the Second World War starts in 1939, Franco opens the tunnel again. In fact, the Trans-Pyrenean line and the Canfranc station were at their most active during this period. So why did Franco choose to open it during the Second World War? The key to this mystery lies in a meeting between Hitler and Franco that was held at another border station between France and Spain. Hendaye.
The relationship between Franco and Hitler was not as straightforward as you might have thought, considering they were both fascists. Hitler was a much more extreme figure than Franco. I'm not saying that Franco was a nice man, but at the same time, Spain officially was neutral. But, of course, its political system was very sympathetic to Nazism.
However, Hitler had a clear agenda.
His mission was to try and persuade Franco to join the axis of himself and Mussolini, and essentially to finish off Britain by choking off the Straits of Gibraltar, cutting off Britain's access to its empire, and leading hopefully to a swift Axis victory. But it didn't turn out like that.
In theory, there was no reason why Spain wouldn't be loyal to the Reich.
Franco owed Hitler because he owed him the victory in the Spanish Civil War. So he owed Hitler big time.
The Nazis helped Franco come to power by lending Franco aeroplanes from the German Air Force during the Spanish Civil War. You know, after all, it is the German Air Force that is bombing towns in Spain in the late 1930s. The famous picture by Picasso, Guernica, depicts the outcome of a German air raid on a Spanish town.
But it became clear at the Hendaye meeting that things wouldn't go Hitler's way.
Hitler was so frustrated that he said he'd rather have 4 teeth pulled than go through such an experience again. Spain was in ruins. It was impoverished, it just fought this bloody 3-year civil war, and frankly, Spain couldn't afford to get involved in the Second World War, even if it had really wanted to.
The dice were cast. Spain would remain neutral, and Hitler would have to do without his help. Or would he? In spite of Spain's neutrality, the Führer managed to secure a Nazi trade deal that would use the Trans-Pyrenean line to ship a vital mineral from Spain in exchange for Nazi gold. The secret to this trade is buried underground in Canfranc, as local journalist Ramon Campo knows.
The most essential raw material that Franco and Spain supplied the Nazis was wolfram, also known as tungsten.
Tungsten is a metal which, when added to steel, holds some pretty magical properties. It reinforces steel and creates this powerful material, which really gives you the edge if you're trying to win a war.
In 2002, Ramon and Canfranc mayor Victor Lopez found the metal buried under the old platform, proof that it did transit here.
Tungsten was an absolutely vital war material. Both sides needed it, and the Germans were ready to do anything they could to get hold of it.
A dark and sinister trade was taking place to pay for this. The Nazis were using gold obtained in any way possible across Europe to fund their side of the deal. This secret trade was made very easy by the station's very particular status.
Canfranc essentially, during the war, was in geographical limbo. Before the war, as an international terminus, it was both Spanish soil and French soil, and the Nazis were able to use that to their advantage. So during the war, when they occupy France, they could also send their troops to Canfranc in Spain. So it's the only part of Spain, supposedly neutral, during the Second World War that has German troops on it.
Santiago Maraco was a child when that happened.
I can remember the Nazi flag flying outside the station, above the French administration. It was clear then that the German army was now in charge.
But right under the Germans' nose, illicit activities were taking place.
All sorts of people, all sorts of things came through. Spies, Jewish people fleeing persecution, secret agents, people sympathizing with the Allied side, trying to escape the Nazis, all came through this one station.
Even though it was built in order to strengthen the ties between France and Spain before the war, what it ends up doing is promoting secret activity during the war.
The vast building complex at the station became the stage for intrigues and mysteries worthy of Hollywood movies.
Here, people save 200 child Jews.
The children were traveling as passengers or hidden in the restaurant's cold cabinet.
This is the train to freedom.
But the train to freedom was filled with risks and danger.
If you were a rail traveller passing through Canfranc, you would have met German border guards, Vichy French border guards, people fleeing Nazi persecution, and spies of all sorts. They were all rubbing shoulders in the cafe and waiting room at the station.
And the key place where all these people met in Canfranc was the Hotel Morocco, which belonged to Santiago's family.
There were all sorts of people at my father's restaurant and bar, and they all had completely different agendas. I believe everyone knew what the others were up to, but they left each other alone.
Canfranc becomes almost like a scene from Casablanca during the war. On one level, literally, you have Nazis holding parties. And yet on the level above them, you've got railway workers who are gathering information and selling it on to British diplomats. You've got local women going to these Nazi parties in order to gather intelligence. It becomes kind of like a nest of spies, all in this great big building.
Hidden in plain sight, one man was the master proprietor of the Resistance and Information Network.
If you look at Canfranc Station as like Casablanca, well then it's even got its own Humphrey Bogart figure in the form of Albert Lelay, one of the resistance heroes of the Second World War.
For years, Lelay, the head of the border control, played a double game pretending to accommodate the Germans' needs, while secretly orchestrating the resistance network and their activities. That included train sabotages, as well as information and people smuggling. Simone Cassabon and her parents were part of the resistance.
When I was 9 years old, I was part of the resistance with my mother. We used to smuggle documents from Spain to France. We had to be discreet. I used to take the documents and hide at the front of the train with the driver, while my mother went in the passenger carriage.
By 1943, the Nazis had had enough. They sought to find and throw in jail every spy and every traitor. Simone and her mother weren't caught, but her dad was not as lucky.
When my father was arrested, we still had some documents that we had kept at my grandparents' place. We opened them before destroying them. They showed planes, boats, and details like that. But we didn't even try to understand. We just burned them as fast as we could.
With danger at the door, Albert Lelay's fate was in the balance. Emilio Astier's grandfather was part of Lelay's resistance movement.
Lelay fled to freedom after receiving a telegram from France that he was very sick. He understands he's in danger, and his family too, and then he decides to walk by the railways of the station to this tunnel. At the end of this tunnel was waiting a car to take him to Madrid and flee from the Germans.
The resistance had been crushed, and the gold carried on flowing.
The gold is one thing. It represents a huge amount of money. In wartime, it's a safe currency. But we shouldn't forget that many other things went through here. There were entire trains filled with musical instruments. Tons of crystal went through here, and lots of clothes too. It's easy to understand that they were from the concentration camps. If you've seen the movie Schindler's List, you can very well imagine the scene here.
In 1945, the Allies defeated Hitler's armies. Now that they were on the losing side, a few remaining Nazi soldiers tried to use Canfranc one last time.
As the war is going badly for the Nazis, many senior Nazis see Spain as a possible place to escape to. And indeed they do.
I remember at the end of the war seeing a group of soldiers accompanied by Spanish people, wounded with bandages. It was the army in defeat.
After the war, Franco closed the international tunnel. It wouldn't be reopened again until 1948.
Canfranc has suffered so many misfortunes that many people say that it was cursed. There was the fire after it opened, the closures under Franco, the Nazi presence. To cap it all, the milestone markers between Madrid and Canfranc show a distance of 666 kilometers.
It had overcome the risks of avalanches, rockfalls, civil war, and World War II. But its tragic destiny was finally sealed one Friday morning when fate would play its last card.
The weather was freezing in March 1970 when a train stopped on the French side for the engineers to try to ensure that the wheels had proper traction on the rails. But while they were doing it, the train slipped and rolled backwards. It gathered speed to over 100 kilometers an hour and crashed into a bridge, destroying it.
Although no one died or was injured, the wreck was devastating for the history of the line. It had not been financially profitable for the French for years, and they took the excuse of the crash to close their section of the Trans-Pyrenean line. From then on, it only ever ran properly on the Spanish side.
I think what is interesting about Canfranc, perhaps because of the remoteness of its isolated position, is that it was virtually unknown and forgotten for so many years. But what is fascinating about it is the discovery of the documents that show how much gold went through it.
The discovery was particularly revolutionary because 3 years before Jonathan came across the papers, there had been an inquiry into Nazi gold.
1997, Bill Clinton say, Spain, oh, please tell to us what's going on with Nazi gold.
There was an official inquiry, but Ramon took it upon himself to research what had happened in Canfranc.
I speak with one person who lives here, was Mr. Asso, and he showed one photograph.
The photograph depicted a Swiss truck in Canfranc. According to Mr. Asso, trucks filled with gold arrived from Switzerland. But because the roads were so badly damaged after the Civil War, the trucks were loaded onto trains for the journey through Spain. This revelation put Ramon in a frustrating situation.
How can I tell this story? I haven't the proof of the gold nice in Canfranc. They have not the documents.
Clinton declassified around 1 million pages for the report. It showed that in 1945, an investigation had established that Spain had acquired at least 27 tons of Nazi gold. After much negotiation, Spain had agreed to return just over 100 kilos of the gold in 1948, a far cry from the total of 86 tons that Jonathan found to have transited through the station during the war.
When I understood that the papers were important, I told the press about it. It caused a scandal. Spain was stunned. They tried to give me a rough ride and took me to trial. I could have been thrown in jail. But now they acknowledge me. My discovery is now accepted as part of Spain's history.
When France closed its side of the railway line, it could and should have been the end of the Canfranc saga. But the Somport Tunnel hadn't had its last word. Digging it out had been one of the biggest challenges of the railway line construction.
In 1908, they started building the International Tunnel, and it took 4 years. 4 years of working round the clock. The Spanish coming from one direction, the French coming from another. 2 tunnels meeting up in the middle. An incredible achievement.
Unwittingly, the railway builders of the early 20th century dug a tunnel that became an opportunity for the scientists of the 21st century.
This has got to be the best reinvention ever. So they took a redundant railway line and they've turned it into a state-of-the-art, buried in a mountain, science laboratory. How cool is that?
Scientists have used the railway tunnel as a ready-made access to the center of the mountain to dig a lab half a mile underground. That's the equivalent of being 1.5 miles under the sea. Thanks to this, scientists are able to study invisible particles without any interference of outside world radiation.
We think that all the stuff around us makes up the universe, the things that we can see and feel and touch. However, this only makes up 15% of the universe. The remaining 85% is made up of something known as dark matter. For scientists, dark matter remains a mystery. We can't fully understand it. We certainly can't sample it directly. But if scientists can crack this mystery, they could make sense of the entire universe, its past, its present, and its future.
This story started in the railway tunnel, and 100 years afterwards, it finishes here, where we are trying to crack the mysteries of the universe.
Today, curse or no curse, the Trans-Pyreneans' beauty and rich history pull people towards Canfranc one last time. More tourists have visited the international station now than passengers ever traveled on it when it was opened. There is one last attempt to give the railway line what it seems to have lacked for so many years: a meaning.
Of course, the idea of this line was to be a viable commercial route across directly the Pyrenees, but of course built to single track, not double track, and that meant you only have one train on one part of it at any one time. Now that means it's quite a low intensity route. And also by the time it was built, the roads were getting better and better as well. You know, by the time it had been finished, it was almost outdated. It was basically a 19th century railway finished in the 20th century. It was a thing that was old before its time. It could never quite keep up with the world around it.
That amount of engineering in the Pyrenees has left its scars. From the road, you can see old tunnels, bits of abandoned railway engineering. Why bother to take it away when it's not hurting anyone?
Looking back on it, the Trans-Pyrenean railway line is quite a haunting project, not only because of the ghostly beauty of Canfranc station, but also because of the power of the vision that put the railway line in and then that let it crumble.
From dreams of grandeur through its eventful lifetime and to its eventual demise, the Trans-Pyrenean railway line and Canfranc station now remain the silent witness of the 20th century's brightest and darkest hours. Thanks for exploring the past with us today. If you liked this episode, please be sure to follow for more. We post new episodes every Tuesday and Thursday. Don't forget to leave a comment below And feel free to leave us a rating or review. Your feedback helps us reach more listeners like you. And for more from the Like a Shot Network, check out Where Did Everyone Go? Histories of the Abandoned, a deep dive into the incredible stories behind forgotten places. Available now on your favorite podcast platforms. Thanks for listening.